Well, all right, folks, how you doing? Welcome to episode 25. I don't know if that's our silver jubilee or gold or platinum or tin or something like that. But again, we are back here at McGold-RIFFS bringing you the best and the greatest guitar players I can find. And I found a huge one today. And I've been watching him for years on YouTube doing these amazing things, as you just saw right here. I have Mr. Dave Levine with me right now today. Dave started guitar way back in the 80s. I was like in my 30s then, but that's okay. In the 80s and early 90s, he played for several local bands before moving to Los Angeles. Once in Los Angeles, Dave became a session player and formed the band Big Angry. And talking about LA, it takes a lot of courage to do that and just up and move to, at that point, probably the greatest guitar players in the world were in that area. To go there, you really, you're up against the best. Dave also played guitar and wrote songs for country singer Erin Ann Scott, and I want to talk about that as well. During some downtime after writing and producing her country record, Dave got involved in managing West LA music. And really, we have so much to talk about today, Dave, but I'd love to talk about the gear world and how dysfunctional some of it is these days and where it's going. Guys like me who actually spend quite a bit in how I do it these days, which is 99.9% Sweetwater, but we'll talk about it. During that time, he also freelanced and consulted for many guitar companies, earning himself a strong reputation in the musical instrument business. We'll talk about NAMM too, because we were talking about his podcast earlier. Dave returned to Boston while on a break from a project to assist his family with his dad, who went into heart surgery. During this time, Dave performed with many local bands. Currently, Dave plays guitar for 6 different projects and bass in one other, and that seems to be the trend these days. 30, 40 years ago when I was doing bands, it was pretty much you stayed with one band, and that's what you all did. From everything I hear these days, everybody's doing multiple projects because you never know which one's going to, take off. So people are doing that. Currently, Dave plays guitar for, we already said that. In addition to performing live, Dave teaches full-time during the day. I want to talk about that. And hosts a popular YouTube channel, aptly named Dave's Guitar Channel. And we'll talk about that. Dave has 5,000 subscribers to his channel, which is beyond amazing. And you haven't been on YouTube that long, really. To get 5,000 subscribers, it was 600. I looked up this morning, 615,000 views. I mean, that's a lot, man. So we'll talk about your guitar teaching, your rants and raves. He also has a podcast, and we'll try to find out what Dave doesn't do, and we'll take it from there. So, Dave, welcome to the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And what I like to do is start from the very beginning, because we were talking about this earlier. What led to this insanity? And it is a sickness some of us have.
Oh, I agree.
And was it, you were growing up in the early 80s, teenage years.
Yeah.
So what got you into it, Dave?
Well, I was always a Kiss fan growing up. And in 1980, my mother was trying to force lessons on me because I already played piano and trumpet. And so I was like, well, I'll learn a Kiss song. And I wanted to learn how to play Black Diamond. That guy came over the house maybe 4 or 5 times, and then I stopped. And about a year later, I was outside of a music store where there's a Papagino's in the Canton area, and I saw a friend of mine, and he had drumsticks. I said, what are you doing? He was like, I'm taking drum lessons. I'm like, I'll play guitar, we'll throw a band together. He was like, giddy up. So my mother came to pick me up. I told her what was going on. She was like, I'll sign you up, sign me up for lessons. And that was it.
You were like 15-ish?
13.
13.
13,
Okay,
I started, and I took lessons from a guy named John Tolius, who's like a local legend in my eyes as far as teaching everybody in that area from that time.
Thanks, John. If he's out there, and we'll see.
Oh, yeah, I speak to John every now and then, and he's still out there teaching.
Well, John, you created a monster. And we got a monster here right now.
Yeah, right.
So you found a drummer, and it's funny, that reminds me of the Keith Richards story and Mick Jagger. Keith was walking around with like a Howlin' Moon sort of, or some, like blues album, and Mick Jagger saw him and said, hey, what do you do? It's like, I play guitar, and I think he knew 2 chords.
Right, exactly.
And John Lennon and Paul McCartney met the same way. So how'd that go with that band, and did you stick with that through high school?
No.
Did you find a bass player?
No, we played together, him and I, probably a few times, and then I was playing with other people, just playing in bands and doing stuff. It took me a little while to get it going. By the time I'm 15, I bought an electric guitar.
And what was that?
It was an Aria Pro 2 that I got at South Shore Music from the Volpes. And Peter still runs the store down there.
I don't even know that guitar, Aria.
It was an Aria. They were a Japanese company, and it was like an Explorer-shaped guitar. It was called a ZZ Deluxe. I got that in a PV Bandit. And I played that basically till 1986.
Was it playable?
Yeah, it was great. It was very Stratish, which is why I've always stuck with Strats, because it's what I grew up on. And
the interesting thing about your generation versus my generation, the cheap guitars or the inexpensive guitars when I was a kid were unplayable.
Right.
And how much did that go for?
It's probably $200 back
then. It's like $200 guitar would get you almost nothing in the 60s. And I brought this because just in tribute to you, this is probably my oldest guitar, and I bought this with $400 of paper route money.
Wow!
And in 1970, and it's still just a great guitar, and I still love it. But this is about $450 of paper route money, plus I traded in a Jaguar, which I wish I had back then. And I hated the Jaguar. I still hate it to this day.
Yeah.
But now, because of indie guys, it's the hip guitar. I still think it sounds horrible.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Jag.
Go on, man. So it's so you're banging around with that Aria. You have what kind of amp you say?
A PV Bandit 65, which is a POS.
POS.
Not a good amp.
Yeah, we can't say that, but you know what we're talking about, right? Well, and we all had those kind of lousy amps when we started. Although my first amp was a Bandmaster, believe it or not, a big one.
Yeah, it's a nice amp.
Yeah, it was nice enough.
Yeah, so I mean, I basically had to make the PVs make it work, and I was going against. I remember like right around '86, I was playing up against people that had Marshall. '87, I played in a band where a guy had a Jubilee. And I ended up I was like, well, I should step up my amp. And
so, 86, I know you were graduating high school then. Did you have a big band then? Were you like the big band around Canton?
No, I played off and on in bands, but I never really found anything that I really dug. We were doing some recordings. I had a Tascam 4-track, and I had a couple of guys that were recording. And I was learning kind of that aspect of it because I do produce and have produced in Los Angeles. So I got into that a lot, and it wasn't until about '87 I got into a band and played around. But then even then, I was so fickle because we started this metal band around '87. By '88, I was done. I'm like, I heard Steely Dan and Toto, and I'm like, yeah, I like what I'm hearing these guys. And then I was trying to figure out, like, remember Chet Cataldo from Aspira Gyra, and I was trying to figure out all the...
It's interesting. I didn't think you were jazz guys because I've watched a bunch of your really hard rock stuff on YouTube, and so you really like, doing some of that,
Yeah, well, I do. I teach Josie on there, and I teach Josie on my channel. That's one of my biggest videos that I have. And basically, I teach like how the stacking of chords. When it's like all those stacks, and how you can approach those stacks is.
I mean, I love this stuff,
Yeah.
What is the one I love?
Right. Well, that's oh yeah.
More with the, I mean, I started with Chuck Berry's, but then when I heard the Beatles, I'm like, what's this about? What are these chords? When I was like 14, 15.
Well, even Steely Dan, when you listen to Donald Fagen talk about the structure of the songs, like on this E11, that he plays. But then he plays an A major 9. You know what I mean? And that really is an E chord with an A root.
Yeah.
And that's how he looks at it, E over A.
Right, which is typical for a keyboard player. And it's easier for a keyboard player because they do this and they do this. They got two hands.
I started on piano. And so that's how I look at all those chords. And so when I teach guitar, or when I'm talking about people that you're playing guitar, if you're going to solo over this, you can think of this as the E chord. Like, if you play like an E major scale, like to the other chord, and it's a whole step down. He's playing to a D chord.
Cool.
And it's that basically, and you could also look at it like this would be the D11 chord is a C really, a C chord with a D in the root. So you can go this to a G over D, which really is the key of G.
Yeah.
So if you're playing that, then this would be the key of A. So you can play right, and that's what Skunk's doing in that song.
Right, and that's I saw them recently this past October at the Orpheum, and John Harrington is a guitar player.
Yes,
I was right in front of him.
Yeah,
and they had a young kid too, like a 25-year-old kid who was sort of. They didn't give him much, but he was, John was tutoring him.
Yeah,
and it's interesting. John's one of my favorite guitar players. So continue on.
I like John. My problem with Steely Dan is they spent so much meticulous time getting the right solos for the songs, and then live they let them just go have at it. And I'd rather go hear them play the real solos. I'd want them to be true to the record because that's what you spent all that time. Yeah. It's part of the composition at this point.
John will give you a taste.
Yeah, he does.
And then he'll do his own thing.
Yeah. And Drew Zing did the same when he first started with them too. And
it depends on the music director or the guy who's running, Donald Fagen, for those guys. It's I've seen Paul McCartney 4 times in the past 10 years, believe it or not. And every show was exactly the same.
Yeah.
It was exactly like the record.
Yeah.
But, there were some sort of negatives to that. I felt there was less of spontaneity. But so let's go on again about you, Dave. So you're 19. You're getting into hipper stuff. And how are you doing that? You doing it by yourself?
I just think it was different. And when I was a senior in high school, I brought up the teacher was bringing up some music theory stuff, and we didn't see eye to eye.
Cool.
And I did not like the way they taught music theory. So I used to skip school like my senior year, and I would take the train into Boston and buy Berkeley books.
Right.
And then I would read them, and I was like, yeah, I don't really agree with this. And I thought I came up with this whole number system, which eventually I found out was already in existence since the 50s, called the Nashville number system.
Yeah.
I'm out in L.A. and doing a session. A guy hands me a page with numbers on it. I'm like, what the hell's this?
Yeah.
He's like, it's the Nashville system. I'm like, yeah, I thought I made it up.
Right, and their system is different than if I go a 1 to a 5 to a 4. They think of it differently, right? So like
No.
G to a D to a C.
No, G to a D to a C would be the same. But if
It'd
you
be
went
a 1,
from a
5, 4, okay.
But if you went to a 1 to a 2, you would have to call the 2 a minor.
2 minus 7, yeah.
You would have to say minus 7 after the 2, whereas in a regular numbering system, you would just call it a 2 because the 2 would automatically be a minus 7.
Cool.
You know what I mean? But in Nashville, the Nashville number system, you have to notate if it's minor. It's always assumed a major.
So continue on your story, man. So you're 19, 20-ish. What are you doing?
So
when do you go to L.A.?
So then I was teaching. Then I was playing
around here.
Around here, had a couple of different bands. 21, 22 years old. I'm playing in a band in Mattapan, and I'm forced to learn every funk song. I'm the only white kid in the band. Yeah, but stuff you never heard, like stuff you'd be like, what the hell was this? Like stuff I had never heard of. Deep cuts from Ohio players and
really? Wow.
and Slave and I was the only white guy in the band, and they were all like, these are like everybody
It's
knew.
like early 90s we're talking about.
Yes. And at that point, that was right around the time I left and went to L.A. My brother got into law school out in Los Angeles, and I'm like, I'll go with you.
So tell me about that adventure. What'd you do? What'd you take? Did you sell everything? Or
I brought 2 guitars.
Yeah.
And
let me interrupt you there. Are you a Strat guy or a Les Paul guy?
Strat.
Why is that?
It's just kind of like what I grew up on.
See, and I didn't because, again, I was a poor kid from Alston.
Yeah.
And all I could do, I was Jimmy Page. And
Yeah.
I'm like, Jimmy Page is a Sunburst Les Paul. That's what I want. But I always wanted a Strat too, but I never had the money. I just recently, my kids got me a Telly for Christmas that I love.
Well, Page played a Telly in the studio on the first 2 records.
I know, which is
with a Les
hard to
Paul.
believe when you listen. It's like, oh man, that sounds like a Les Paul. But, so you had a couple of guitars and you're a Strat guy sort of thing. So then
And I had a couple of guitars. Well, actually, when I moved to L.A., I had 4 or 5 guitars. I had a bunch of Kramer Berettas at the time. That's what I was playing.
Yeah.
And then what happened was I had a dual rectifier, and I went out and I started playing in one band, and then I met this girl singer.
Dual rectifier is Miss Boogie?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I met this girl singer and started playing acoustic, basically. I almost stopped playing electric for a few years.
That's exclusively what I do these days for the most part is acoustic.
So I was writing acoustic for her, playing a lot of acoustic gigs.
Is that the woman we were talking about?
No, this was a girl named Krista Carson.
Uh-huh.
And then what happened with Krista was we kept playing, but I was very friendly with these brothers, the Barbarian brothers, the 2 bodybuilding brothers that are in like the Flamingo Kid, and they're in DC Cab, and great guys, a couple of knuckleheads, but they're great.
Yeah.
And they were putting together this children's record thing, and they were working with Danny and Michael Cimbello.
Uh-huh. No.
Well, Michael Cimbello was Stevie Wonder's guitar player when he was 17.
Wow, I think I've heard of that guy.
And then he had the hit Maniac in 1981. 83, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was already played with Stevie for like almost...
did he do that solo? That big solo? Yeah, that was a big solo.
Yeah.
And it was, a little bit of tapping.
He wrote some great songs. He wrote a great song that David Sanborn did called The Dream, which is he was a great musician. And they hired me to come in and play guitar and produce on these things. And so that was kind of my foot in the door
Your
for session.
Mid-20s, early 20s?
This is 98.
Okay, cool.
So I'm 30.
So you're getting into studios.
Yeah, I'm into the studio work then. And then I met a guy, through that session, I met Lee Carreri. Now, Lee was Bruno in Fame. And Lee was a producer around L.A. And Lee was like, can you play to a moving click? And I'm like, oh, absolutely. Never say no.
Right.
I'm like, absolutely.
That's the key.
I'm like, absolutely.
Tell the kids out there.
Yeah, I had no idea what the hell it even was. I'm like, yeah, whatever you need.
Right.
So he's
that's
like,
the answer in Hollywood. Do you play mandolin? Yes.
Yeah.
I get a mandolin.
I had that happen. The day I bought a mandolin, someone asked if I played. I never played it in my life.
Right,
I'm like,
right.
Send me the.
And you got big fingers, and I got big
Oh,
fingers
that's
too.
why I like a
It's
Strat,
like
'cause
mandolins
the
is just so
frets are wider apart.
It's tough because
Yeah.
you need small fingers for a mandolin.
It was the first session I ever did paid for it, which was great.
Right.
That was awesome. But yeah, so he called me, asked me if I could play to a moving click. I said yeah.
Were you union?
Not at that time.
Okay.
But I became union like a year later with Lee, because Lee had a union gig that I had to get unionized for.
Right.
And that was the only gig in the whole time I did session work, which was 20 years that I've
I was in the union in the 70s because we were traveling doing hotel gigs, and we assumed we'd get hit. We never got hit on it at all, and it never got me a gig.
Yeah, it doesn't do it. You know what? The non-union gigs, I did all like, we did NBA on TNT and TBS. We did it. I remember a buddy of mine calls me up and he's like, I just watched a commercial for the NBA. Did you play guitar on that? I'm like, I did. He's like, I knew that was you. I thought that was the coolest thing that my buddy.
What was that like, man, being an LA studio musician?
It's okay.
How heavy was the reading, and how are you as a reader?
Well, a lot of it's charts.
Right.
I can read charts till the cows come home. Charts I can read. Sheet music, when they put sheet music in front of me, then you get a little.
Yeah, and I used to be really good at it. I started with it. I did a gig. I've done gigs on and off for the years with the Platters and the Drifters and the Coasters. I did 2 weeks ago. I did with them. It's all reading. It's heavy reading, but they let you kind of. If you kind of know the song,
Yeah.
Only you.
Right. Yeah.
You just play whatever arpeggio you want. Once you know the tune.
Well, yeah. Well, when you're reading charts, it's you're playing whatever you come up with.
Right. Exactly.
A lot of times when you're doing commercial work, they don't want you to come up with anything. They basically tell you, play a G chord, like just play, and you're sitting there like, you need me for this?
Yeah.
And the guy's like, yeah.
It's interesting. You know Carl Verheyen?
Oh yeah,
Carl's one of the best in LA, and he talks about that. Once you establish yourself, they'll have something written, and he'll play because he's a really good reader. But he says, "Do you want to know how a real guitar player would play this part?" And then he just makes up his own part. Do you know one of the? And I've said this on the show before. Probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, beyond Tommy Tedesco, who's a hero of mine. Steve Lukather.
Oh, I love
Horrible
Luke.
reader. Hard can't read.
Yeah, I love Luke. But Luke has a sensibility. He can read. I mean, he can read charts. He's not. He can't sight read.
No.
He says and sight reading, it's one of those things. You have to do it all the time.
He was a guitar player, to give you an idea. He's been a guitar player in so many things you wouldn't believe. But Thriller, if you think of Thriller, and they threw some stuff and they said Jeff Porcaro and Dave Porcaro.
Well, Jeff plays on everything.
Right. And
Jeff's on every record.
Make something out of this, and they made something out of not a lot to begin with.
So in LA, I worked with a lot of guys that went to Grant High School. That's the high school they all went to.
Right.
So Lukather was pulled. I mean, Jeff was pulled out of high school he was 17 to go tour with Sonny and Cher. Yep. He didn't finish high school.
Yep.
Then he went and played with Louis Shelton. Hired him and David Page to do the Seals and Crofts Diamond Girl album.
And we're talking about Jeff Porcaro.
Probably
one of the greatest drummers of all time.
One of my favorites.
All that Steely Dan stuff.
He played. He did the. What's that album? He did Katie Lied.
Yeah.
He did the whole album that Katie Lied except one song. I think they called Hal Blaine in on one song on that record. But yeah, so Jeff.
He's throwing out names. Hal Blaine, the #1 drummer of all time in LA, just passed away in his 90s. Recently.
Hal Blaine was awesome. But Jeff was like, he's on everything. And so was Steve. Steve played for the Tubes. He played
he did that
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
I can't remember that. The big hit for the Tubes.
Talk to you later.
Yeah,
and he also did She's a Beauty.
Yeah,
She's a Beauty. He did the solo because him and Fee were buddies.
Yeah.
Fee were able
to
sing.
So he was the guy. But again, that kind of faded away from what I've read over the years.
Pro Tools.
And so you're in...
Pro Tools killed it for a lot of guys.
So guys were coming. You said they'll send you... play over this, and you're supposed to have all that stuff at home, right?
You can, but some of the studios, like I did a lot of work for Universal Music Group. They have their own studio downstairs there.
Right, Universal, cool. That's
cool.
So
they had their own studio, and I would play. And it doesn't matter who you play for, like what level you get to. You're always going to deal with some knuckleheads type stuff going on. So I went into this studio. They didn't have any charts. I went into this one gig I had at Universal. There was no charts. The record or the music they were playing back to me wasn't in tune. So I kept saying, are we in E flat or did you play this in E? And just tell me how you want me to, and it was just, they didn't know. I basically had to have a guy sit and play piano for me so I could watch him play it. And then I'm like, all right, I got it. Let's do it. And I thought, literally, I'm just waiting to hear from the girl that booked me the gig because she's going to scream and whatever. And she's like, they loved you. I'm like, are you kidding? I thought I was being difficult because they just had nothing prepared.
Sometimes you never know.
You never know. You never know. And I was nice, but I was just like, I had no idea what they wanted from me. And they had no charts, no nothing. And yeah.
So we're into the late 90s. What are you doing? Where does it go from there? And how did you get into the music retail world?
Well, actually, at that time, I was also working full-time at Gold's Gym. I got into bodybuilding, and I was living...
Yeah, you look like you lift.
I haven't in a while, but I used to...
People say I should lift, but I say, those things are heavy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so I was working there, and that's where I met so many people. I mean, it would be so funny. Like, Bob Claremountain would come by, and I'd be like... Are you the Bob Claremountain? He was like, why would you know me? And I'm like, you worked on this, you mixed this, you did this. And then he told me his whole story. It was great. He was a super nice guy. So I kind of got my foot in by knowing people. And I was very friendly with John Taylor from Duran Duran. And John was like, hey, do you want to do a gig with me? I got to do this charity gig, and I'd love to have you. And I said, well, do you want to hear me play first? He goes, nah, you're a nice guy, whatever. Yep. He's like, I don't care how people play.
That's how LA is. It's like...
And they don't care how... I don't care how you play. I'm sure you're pretty good. He says you're good, but he's like, you're a nice guy.
That's how it works there, right?
Yeah, it's all about, he liked my taste of music. We were talking about a couple of bands. Japan was a big band that he liked. And he loved the album Queen, too. And so we would always talk about how that album gets no love. But yeah, he was a super nice guy.
So you're working, as a lot of us do, we work our what we call straight jobs.
Yes.
Or day jobs, or whatever, however you want to call it. And you were doing the gigs at night.
Yes.
And were you going and playing the whiskey and all those big bars? What was that like?
So around 2000, a buddy of mine called me up and he was like, have you heard this guy sing? And I said, yeah, but it wasn't really my kind of music. And he's like, no, he wants to do heavier stuff now like you do. We should put a band together. I said, okay, so we put this band together.
Let me interrupt you. So you got back into heavier music?
Yes.
But with a Steely Dan mentality?
No, not with that mentality, but just if you ever listen to Eddie Trunk.
I love Eddie. Eddie's one I listen every day on
They
volume.
had a show with Don Jameson and Jim, I can't remember his last name, the two comedians. They love everything metal.
Yeah.
I do not. I like what's good.
And I think it's an age thing, because I started with metal at Led Zeppelin. And then I went to Berkeley, so I went down that road, and I essentially am a mellower kind of guitar player,
But I'm not of the thought that everything is good. It's the good is good, the bad sucks.
Right.
So then if you go to Steely Dan or that type of music, there's great, and there's not so great.
Yeah, they have a bunch of songs.
I'm not a big Lee Ritenour fan, so when I hear his music, it puts me to sleep.
Music,
But I'm a big Holdsworth
he can play.
fan. Yeah, he's a good player.
Alan Holdsworth can play like nobody.
Well, to me, playing is nothing because, and that's what I think I got out of playing in LA is, like, I am not a fan of, what's that band that does What Is Hip?
Oh, Tower of Power.
Not a fan.
Yeah.
They can't. They don't have a song. You can have the best players in the world. If you don't have a song, you're nothing.
And their slow songs were always horrible. You're still a young man and that
Still
stuff like
man's
that.
terrible.
I mean, I liked What Is Hip. That was about it. What Is Hip?
Well, because it had
And
all the
guitar
pushes
part
and the
is
horns,
really
all
nice.
the stabs.
It's a Les Paul right through a twin with a compressor.
Yeah.
And there's a story about the guitar player in that band. He was actually the guy who sold drugs to Barry Bonds. The
really?
steroids. It's that guy. I forget that guy's name.
But you look at the band like that and look at a band like Earth, Wind, and Fire.
I love Earth, Wind, and Fire.
I love them because they have songs.
And don't even get me into Earth, Wind, Fire. Were just inducted to the Kennedy Hall of Center of Honor.
Yeah.
And they ended the show with the Jonas Brothers, and I'm like, I don't think that works,
Right.
man. Because I love and the guitar player with that band was amazing.
Al McKay was. I love it. And Johnny.
I forget. I gotta get you into my life. Gotta get you into my life.
Yeah, it was Al McKay.
Yeah,
I loved Al McKay.
Very tasteful, and he's actually touring with like Earth, Wind, and Fire Experience.
Yeah.
And Earth, Wind, and Fire still got like
He was a
3
lefty
guys.
too.
Yeah.
He was a lefty.
And
Al.
what a tasteful guitar player. Look, kids out there.
Yeah, Al McKay is awesome.
So it's 2000. You get introduced to somebody saying, "Hey, guy wants to do a heavier sort of thing." What happens with that band? What's the name of that band?
That's the Big Angry.
Uh huh.
And that's when
I love the name.
Thanks. Yeah, it was actually a song I had written about L.A. and how it treats the women in L.A. And I called it the Big Angry Machine.
I bet.
And so that band, we played everywhere. The Troubadour, the Whiskey. We played the Viper, and we played the
What's
Dragonfly.
What's it like, man? Again, I'm older than you. In Boston, believe it or not, when you were very young, the Channel, Bun Ratties, the Rat, TT the Bears, all these school clubs were and the record companies were coming here because we had, Jay Giles, we had, the Cars and all that sort of stuff. But it was difficult to get into those gigs. I can't imagine what it's like in L.A.
Yeah, we had a pretty good following. We played a place. We got lucky. We booked a place called The Gig on Melrose. Mm-hmm. We had about 200
Is that like the center of L.A. or something like that?
It was a hopping club at the time.
Cool.
But they're not there anymore. They closed. The guy, Neil, closed it. He was the owner. But Neil came and saw us. We had 200 people. The room barely fit.
200? That's unheard of today.
The room barely fit anybody.
And in 20 years, a lot has changed with the live music world. It's almost impossible to get 200 people to do anything today.
So he was like, you guys could be the house band here. We love you here. That kind of word, we had management, and our management just went and ran with it, and we got the Troubadour. We got the Whiskey a lot. The Whiskey we played, and they loved us there. So they liked us. It was fun. And
were you opening, or were you like the lead act?
No, there's no such thing, really. When you play the Whiskey, the Whiskey has bands from 9:30, 10 o'clock to 1 in the morning.
Yep.
We would try to get an 11 o'clock show.
Cool. Yeah.
But, it's a machine. Because you get there, you set up, you do your sound check, now you're hanging out in the back. When you're done, they want you out. Right. Get out.
Again, I used to play Channel quite a bit, and we opened for a bunch of big bands. And the Channel had kind of iffy ownership back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't ask you to get off the stage. They said, you get 5 minutes and we throw your stuff off.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like you. I'm a big Mesa Boogie guy, and I had these expensive Mesa Boogies. It's like,
oh, yeah.
You got off the stage in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you know any guitar player, that's very hard, but you just gather your cables, get those off, get your guitar off, grab your amp, unplug, and get off because they will throw you off.
Yeah, the Whiskey does a good job. It's a great sounding club. My favorite club to play out there was the Troubadour, though. That's a special place. I mean,
well, it's famous.
Yeah,
I mean,
but it's just great. It's
still great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whiskey's fun. I had a buddy of mine tell me one time, he said he was older than I was. He was born in 50, he passed already now, and he said in 1970 he walked into the Whiskey because it was empty, and he was watching a band called Yes. And he was like, these guys are going to be big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever, I can't remember that tune. But they were unbelievable. Probably one of the greatest bands of all time as far as musicianship.
Yeah, great musicians.
You didn't get much better than Steve. I forget
Steve Howe.
Steve Howe.
Yeah, Bill Bruford on drums.
Yeah. So Yes is just hanging out playing, to nobody.
Yeah, to nobody.
So how'd that go? Did you get some record company interest?
So we had Warner Brothers talking to us.
And are you a Gold still in?
No. I mean, just working out there, but not working there. I worked there a year and a half.
So did you do the retail thing from the music business right around your 30s?
No, around then I was just working, making money, doing sessions.
Music. Cool.
Yeah.
Which is tough to do.
Yeah, it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we were playing everywhere, and that was going strong. 2 years, we went and played. We went
original music.
All original. And went out to, and you can see it. It's on YouTube. You could look up the Big Angry live at the Whiskey or live at CBGB's. We drove out to New York to play CBGB's before they closed. Yeah,
wow.
Because half the band was from New York. It was and it was two guys from Boston. The original band was two guys from Boston, two guys from New York.
Oh, really?
And everybody had heavy
in
accents.
LA, well, that's kind of cool. You have that East Coast edge. Would probably might give you an advantage in the LA sort of laid back scene.
Yeah, people kind of dug it, and but then. Then I started playing for Aaron Ann Scott.
So the Big Angry break up? They didn't
we were still playing.
You kept it going.
We kept it going. We played. The last thing we did in 2007. We played for a film called Bigger, Stronger, Faster, and we did the music for that film. We did 4 songs for them.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And that was the last. But we still talk. In fact, we're talking about going in the studio and just recording everything we did.
So you went with this woman here, Erin Ann Scott, and now tell me, Dave, how your style fits with the country.
Well, I'm also a huge. So when I was 19, a buddy of mine went to. Kid grew up in Canton. He went to school down in Texas.
Uh-huh.
And he comes back with this album by Steve Wariner and says, "Check this out." And I loved it.
Uh-huh.
So I became a huge Steve Wariner fan. In '96, he's playing in L.A. at the Roxy, and I'm like, I'm going to go see Steve Wariner. Now here I am thinking this guy's just a singer and that he's got a great band.
Yeah.
He came out monster player.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't believe how good he was.
I don't know him. I got to look him up.
Yeah, he's phenomenal, and he was like he's one of the 4 certified guitar players from Chet Atkins. Like he was.
Oh, one of those guys, right? Maybe I've heard of this guy. I'm a big fan of Jude Gold. Do you know Jude?
No.
Jude's a guitar player in Jefferson Airplane right now, but he's a traveling kind of guy. He does the national gigs, but he has a great podcast which you will love. It's called No Guitar Is Safe, and he had that guy on, and it's definitely worth any guitar player.
Yeah.
And I want to plug some of your things you're doing with your podcast and whatnot. So tell me about the country thing.
So she played me a couple of songs, and she wanted me to help her with her songs.
What kind of stuff was it? Can you show me? Is it like CFG type,
well,
CA minor?
No, like we did like one of the songs I wrote for was kind of like a Ricky Lee Jones type of thing where it's like and it would be in E major.
I love that. That's a nice one.
So and it's a 6/8 feel, and then we did like this like. So I wrote a song for her called "Saying Goodbye," which was she was all upset one day we were writing, and she was like her grandfather was passing away. It was her mother's father. And so I said, well, where's your mom? And she's like, she's by his side. And I'm like, come back after she had things to do. I said, come back later in the day. And she came back. I had the whole song written about a girl that has to, how every girl basically has to say goodbye to their father at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And so she did that. And that got the eye of some people that had money in Los Angeles. And they were willing to put up like $50,000 to go record a full album. So we got Vinnie Colaiuta to come in and play drums.
That rings a bell.
So Vinnie played with Frank Zappa, Sting, Jeff Beck, Ronnie
All
Scott.
All those nobodies, huh?
Vinnie's awesome. And Vinnie's the nicest guy. He was just an awesome guy. Guy comes in, he's like, what are we eating today? I'm like, I like this guy already.
Yeah, let me interrupt that story for a second. It's something I've seen over the years, and I was at Berkeley in the 70s with some amazing, Gary Burton and some of the greatest musicians of the time, some of the older 40s and 50s guys, and they were all humble for the most, and all good guys.
Great.
And I've noticed the better players, man, they don't have the ego because maybe they just know they don't need to.
Yeah.
And I tell you, there's marginally talented guys that kind of can be jerks,
I agree.
So this guy comes in, so he's a
Vinny's
monster.
Monster. I think he's the best drummer alive. I would argue.
I got to look him up, man.
But Vinny was awesome. We brought Vinny in. We brought in Matt Rawlings, who was the piano player for Lyle Lovett, who was...
I love Lyle. I love everything Lyle does.
Probably the best musician. He looked like a kid. I was like, how are you playing with Lyle on the first album? He's like, tells me so he was like 18 when he first... He tells me the whole Lyle story. It was just great. And Matt was unbelievable. I mean, there was the songs we were throwing at Matt, and I didn't have a chart for it. Matt's like, just play it. And he's writing it out in sheet music in real time.
Yeah.
I was
Genius
just like,
type.
I'm like, this guy's sick.
Yeah.
We had John Leftwich played bass, who used to play with Ricky Lee Jones.
Right. That's a big name too.
Yeah. Oh, so it was a great record. So we did that record.
Yeah.
And
for whom and who was the record company, or was it?
It was investors? A private. It was actually it was private. And it was by it was a guy who I'm going to have on my show, John Bauman, who played Bowser from Sha Na Na, was one of them.
He's still alive?
Oh, he's still kicking and still working.
Sorry, John, I didn't know.
He's still working.
Cool.
Yeah, he's great. All right, super nice guy. He he's out and does a lot of cruises and whatnot. And so so we did that record, and when I finished that record, I wanted to take a little bit of time off just because it was like just a hammering session. It was a lot of work.
Right.
And one of my good friends, when I was telling you earlier, was like, come over to West LA and why don't you work over here? And they made me the manager, and before I knew it, I was...
What was the name of that place?
West LA Music.
Is that still around?
West LA closed in 2012. After like 40
And what was it like?
years.
I'm a big fan of Norman's Guitars.
Yes.
They have a podcast too.
So Mark Agnesi, who used to be the guy on Norman's Rare Guitars, who was the guy that did the Guitar of the Day, he worked with me at West LA.
Unbelievable, that kid. What's his name?
Mark Agnesi. He worked at West LA.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was
Nice guy.
Super sweet kid.
And I love the way he played.
Yeah, great player, great guy.
Great with his fingers too. Sometimes he'd go like this, then he'd have this pick way back here, and then
he hybrid picks. Yeah, he's
Right.
a chicken picker. He's a country guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, again, how in our world works, it's like gigs are. Sometimes you got gigs, sometimes you don't have gigs. Sometimes you eat, sometimes you don't eat.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of music. And then a lot of us say, man, I need some steady income. So that's probably a little bit of the thought you went through?
And it wasn't actually. What happened was he just said, do you want to work for a few months here?
Yeah.
And I said, okay.
Sure.
Once I started and I got really friendly with the owner was like, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They basically was
and
like.
what year was that again?
This is 2006.
Let's go back to that album. Did that album get any interest?
No. In fact, what happened
And it sounds
was,
great. And
it
is
was
it out there
unbelievable.
still? Can you get it anywhere?
You know what happened was she had put it out, but we're remixing it now, and we're going to put it back out on Spotify.
Cool.
But yeah.
Are you still playing with her? Are you still friendly with her?
She's in Nebraska now, married with 2 kids, and I still talk with her. Yeah, she's great.
And the nature of the world of music these days, and like we were talking about, it's like you can collaborate remotely these days.
Yeah.
You know, it's I forget Lori McKenna is the great songwriter in Nashville. She's a mom in Stoughton, Mass, and she just writes and sends stuff electronically and gets ACMs and other big awards like Grammys. So I'm sure you can probably still collaborate with her.
Yeah, I mean, if she wants to go that route. So recently, there has been interest in some of the songs on that, and that's why I'm back in contact with John Bauman.
And that's the biggest issue in Nashville to me, humbly.
Yeah.
I believe it all sounds the same. It's all, It's all like 1, 6, 4, 5.
Yeah, it's formulaic.
And I've heard the story. It's this: if you want to eat,
Yeah.
and you're a songwriter in L.A. in Nashville, you got to run 1, 6, 4, 5, or a combination of those,
Right.
and write a click with a sort of a cliche that you can think of, and then it'll get some airplay.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that Nashville's been poisoned by that. They used to be. Nashville was a great place up until about 2000s, the late, like 2010, when it just became everyone's playing the same shit.
I did, Dave, but I still listen to some of it because I'm waiting for the amazing guitar solo. It seems to be in every song because some of the best guitar players in the world now are in Nashville.
Well, I think if you listen to Brad Paisley's records, you'll be happy with the solos. He's great.
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, he's great.
One of my
great
favorites.
player. Great player, and he was like a guy that grew up on Steve Wariner and Vince Gill's a smoking player still.
Unbelievable.
I mean, smoking.
So let's talk just a little detour. Go into that retail. What's your opinion as to where that world is today?
I think people are more hung up on vintage, and I think it's a lot of nonsense. On my YouTube channel, part of why it's popular is I cause a lot of controversy when I tell people that the wood of the guitar doesn't affect the sound, and people don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear the scientific fact of how guitars are made, or
maybe blindfolded test. That might be a good video series to do.
Oh, you can blindfold people. I tell people all the time when they want to do a blindfold bet, but I want to make them bet because they come so angry at me, and I'm not angry about it, but they love to. You can't tell them, and so that causes a lot of controversy, and also people with tube amps. Like I play a tube, you're playing a tube amp, and I like the way a tube amp feels. But on my channel, when I'm playing, I'm using a $100 Fender Mustang amp, and no one can tell the difference.
Yeah, and it sounds amazing.
No one can hear it, and so I think you're going to see a lot of that technology get more exploited. Like you see, fractal audio stuff is getting bigger. You see a lot of guys around here on the blues circuit using the Quilter amps.
I've seen those, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the way
Ricky came in.
Yeah, I don't like them at all. I don't
Yeah.
think they sound good.
Yeah.
But people like them, and when other people play them, I'm like, oh, that guy sounds good.
Yeah.
But then I go to play it, and I'm like, yeah, and I'll pass.
Yeah.
But, I think people are going to keep buying gear, and there's an addiction to it. There's like everybody wants, the old saying is, how many guitars do you need?
Right.
Always one more.
Yeah, there's a famous line from an NRA, a gun guy. They asked him, "Do you have enough guns?" You know, with that sort of things. And he said, "I have more guns than I need, but not more than I want."
Right.
And that's how guitar plays.
Yeah.
So you must have gas then, right?
I don't.
You don't?
No.
Yeah. Actually, I've heard that gas, by the way, is not what you think it is. It's gear or guitar acquisition syndrome.
Yes.
I have 9. That's about it.
Oh, you have 9 guitars?
Yeah.
Oh, then maybe. Well, I mean, I probably have like 12 guitars, maybe,
Yeah.
but with basses and everything else. But at one point, I had like 60, and I downsized because I'm like, I'll never play these. And I'm selling a couple of more guitars because I'm happy with what like this guitar here. I had to basically make because they wouldn't. It's not something Fender would sell.
Right. And it's
this has like a
amazing.
1 3/4 nut, which I like, which you'd find like on more of a jazz style guitar.
Right, so it's wider.
It's wider here.
Yeah.
It's fatter.
Because you have bigger fingers?
Yeah, I just think it's more comfortable for my hand. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I have little scallopings up
Yeah, if
here
you can get a close up of that,
for the
Andrew.
first and second. I have that, and it's a Wenge neck with an ebony fingerboard and stainless steel
Yeah,
frets.
turn it around and show them the backside how the neck is.
So it's a V-neck. You can see it's like comes to a point. And
in total, how much did this cost you?
under $1,000.
Under $1,000, you know?
It plays better than any. And I used to be the biggest custom shop dealer when I was at West LA.
Oh, really?
And this plays nicer than any custom shop I've played.
You know, you talked back to the thing about not custom gear, not old gear, or what is the term?
Vintage.
Vintage, you know. It's interesting because I probably wrecked this because I took this off. I changed these, and I tended to believe the older guitars were not as good. I thought these new, and this was probably in the 70s when I did this.
Yeah, the Grovers.
You know, and, it's like, oh, you ruined the value of the guitar. It's like, the tuners back then were horrible, that I thought.
Yeah.
But the
old
thing
cool
is,
songs.
whenever you touch anything off these, I still have the baby humbuckers, you know, which, but,
that tip is new. That's not original.
Oh, that's totally. None of these are original, and it's beaten up.
Yeah. But you
typical.
love it. You play it, and
I love it. I love this guitar.
I always tell people
it still has a hard time staying in tune, though.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you're playing people that are into the vintage stuff. For me, if I know a guy's going to come over and do some work on my house, I want him to have the best tools and the newest things you got. Ergonomic. I want it to be great and comfortable. I don't want him sitting there swinging this hammer's from the 1940s. So what?
And I always felt the same way about my amps. I thought they were awful back in the old days. Have you ever heard of the Axe Palace over in Walpole?
Yes.
Have you been there?
Yes, once.
It's like build it and they will come. You know, because I walked in and the kid is great. And I went in to buy a combo. I think you're a combo boogie guy. And he talked me into the Triple Crown, which I love.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I don't.
Triple Crown is their latest.
Okay.
And it's essentially clean, crunch, boogie overdrive. So I don't have to use any pedals. Actually, we're running a little bit out of time. We got a video. Can you tell the folks at home what the video is about?
Sure. This was on one of my rants that I usually do on my channel where I talk about his shred dead because you don't really hear much guitar playing. There's no more solos in music anymore. Right. And so I do a little intro to all my rants, and this was just me shredding to some backing tracks.
Cool. So let's see that video. So we are back, and oftentimes I ask guys, to give some advice to the young kids at home. And if you can give a little bit of advice right over here to this camera here, there is a Dave Levine.
Sure.
Who's living in Norway.
All right.
And he's 12.
Okay.
And he got his first guitar, and he wants to be you, man. How does he do it?
I would say the songs are what's most important. You become the slave to the song, play for the song in every aspect, whether it's when you're playing the chords or whether you're playing a lead, play to make the song better. And if you live by that, you will be on the path to, I think, greatness. That's when you watch these pro guys play and you go into a session and you see the monsters play, they're playing like they're picking it right out of your head what you would imagine the song would need.
Yep.
And they're doing it. And they just know because they're just playing for the song. They're not there to impress you. They're there to make the product better. And that's what I notice when I come back here to Massachusetts, that everyone thinks it's about them. And it's a big turnoff for me when I go like to open jams and I see guys that are thinking it's about them, and I'm like, yeah, it's really about the song. And so whatever you can do to make the song better, focus on that, but don't focus on, it's not about you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's a hard thing to get people out of that habit because, here, one time I saw someone playing and I said, that's not the right chord. Can I show you what the right chord was? The kid got all mad.
Yeah, really.
I like to do it my way. Well, I just thought you would,
Well, you could do it my way or the wrong way.
So when I ran West LA Music one time, I hear this guy and he's doing like this. He's doing like this. All that type of stuff.
Yeah.
All that type of stuff.
Cool.
And I hear him playing and I said, what the hell was that last lick you did? Or it might have been a cascade. Oh, cascade.
Nice.
Where you
That's
do all
cool,
these.
man.
And I was like, what the hell was that? This guy just shows me. And I'm like, man, that's great. And then I was like, let me show you this. Where I showed him a walk-up one. He was like, oh, I never thought of walking it up. And we were talking, having a few laughs. Turns out the guy was the guitar player for the Mavericks.
Oh, really? That's what I've learned from doing this show is if we could be a little bit more collaborative as guitar players and support
not a
each
competition.
other, it's music, and we can learn so much. And I've learned so much doing like 25 of these with various guys, and I've gone from jazz guys to metal guys to unbelievable guys like you. So tell us what's up now, man. What are you doing? You're moving back? You really? Did you
that's
still
the
have
goal.
Your place over there?
No. My brothers are out there. Both my brothers are out there. The goal is to get back there. When I came back here, I felt like I was a little fish out of water. I was playing. I did a bunch of gigs. I worked with Boston Baked Blues for a little bit.
Oh, that's a big band.
Vinny Serino, and I played with.
Oh, I have Tony Serino was a guest.
Yeah, so and I played with a bunch of different bands like that. Blues things that were hiring me, and I'm not a blues fan, and they hated that about me that I wasn't.
I'm not a big blues fan either.
Yeah,
I like cool.
I like
changes.
Larry Carlton blues.
Oh, I was. Big,
like all the.
Like
if you give me a blues, they'll give me like a. Like if you play like a. Like the LA blues where it's like where you play like a G like. But then, that type of stuff. So that's a cool thing. I'll show you real quickly. This was a Larry Carlton thing.
Yeah, he uses melodic minor and.
It's the melodic minor.
Right.
When you go from the 1 to the 4.
Oh, right. He talks
because
about
the 1 to the 4 is the same as the 5 to the 1. So you go. Now you can do the D. You do.
folks, and come back next week.
Great.